I think it's probably been at least at least 2 weeks since I've shot a video recently. Yeah, and I was talking about some other stuff that's been going on. About how I would like to have like a place to go, you know, work at on like a Saturday night and what have you. Well, yeah, I got some stuff that of course, has nothing to do with that, but um, it has some stuff that's kind of sad. No, it's got nothing to do with mom. I did want to talk about Tony a little bit here, and like I said in the description, I do need to say now at the beginning that okay, I may discuss some rather icky things during the course of this video, and if some of you are that kind of person that kind of stuff makes you nauseated, consider yourself warned now, okay, at the beginning. Because I don't need whoever the special snowflake is that might see this video at some point or another be like, ew, gross, and be like, why are you talking about that? Well, there are some people, I think, that might be interested in hearing what I've got to say about what's going on with Tony. Well, today is what? August the 19th, 2023, as I shoot this video, approximately. But let me look here and I'll confirm that. Yeah, it's Saturday, August the 19th, 2023. It's to the point where I'm actually losing track of time. It's been crazy. To be completely honest with y'all. Well, as of this past Tuesday, Tony got admitted back into the hospital. He's been in the hospital since whatever Tuesday was. The 14th? Or 14th was Monday. The 15th of August, 2023. And I have to say, I'm halfway glad they admitted him. Because I gotta be honest, Tony, the last couple of weeks prior to Tuesday, weren't so good for him. I mean, he was crying that I was trying to freeze him to death, and he'd be running a fever, and he'd be burning up, but screaming he was freezing at the same time. I mean, it was really bad. He had and he looked really like white. I mean, like white, like what I call Seamus white. Let me explain what Seamus white is. Seamus white, there's a wrestler in the WWE that his name is Seamus, and that is one white boy. Yeah, I mean, he is white. I mean, he's like this white, like white. I mean, like, it's like he's very white. And I mean, Tony was that white. I mean, I was like, he's Seamus white. And, yeah, I took him to wound care as usual on Tuesday morning. Well, I ratted him out to the doctor when we were there before I had to get up and leave to go get a mammogram done. Because I had to have a mammogram done in the same hospital downstairs in the same building, because we kind of scheduled it all together. Like, well, they ran behind as they always do up there in wound care. But anyway, I read it. The doctor happened to stick his head in the room and said, how y'all doing? I'm like, well, he isn't doing so good, pointing at Tony. And I'm like, in fact, on Monday, the 14th of August, they sent him home. I'm like, they sent him home yesterday. This is me talking on Tuesday. I said, well, they sent him home from work on Tuesday because he's been, throwing up and, just not, right. Well, I'm like, I think he needs a blood transfusion or something because he's not doing so hot. I just told the doctor to his face. I was like, Tony's like, don't tell him anything. I'm like, bite me. I'm going to freaking rat you out. I'm like, I am ratting you out to the doctor because as your wife, it's my job to tell on you when stuff is going wrong. Because I think that the doctor needs to be made aware of the fact that, yes, Tony's not doing so hot. I'm telling you because, you deserve it, that you need to get the best treatment possible. I don't know if they needed to up his antibiotics or what at that point on Monday or Tuesday. It was Tuesday. I told you my days are running together. On Tuesday. Well, they admitted him. I had to go downstairs, like I said, after a while to go get a mammogram done. And I'm like, and he's like, he knew I went downstairs because my appointment for the mammogram was at 12:30. And I'm like, well, it was like 12:15. And I'm like, honey, I need to scoot. I'm like, I've got to, scoot my butt downstairs to the desk, check in, and then get back over to where they do the mammogram so I can get that done. Call me being responsible. And he's like, okay. I'm like, but, I'll like have them take you down there to meet me later or something. Because I figured, yeah, they'll be done in like, they'll be done by the time like I'm getting finished with the mammogram. That is not what happened. I have to tell you. 2 things happened. One, I didn't get the mammogram because the technician did not care for some stuff that was going on with me. And I've had to since reschedule it over at the cancer center because there was some stuff going on with me that I'm not going to discuss here because I'm not sure what's going on. And until I'm 100% sure what the story is on that, I'm not saying anything. But while I was sitting there waiting to get taken back for the mammogram, Tony texts me on the phone and says, hey, they're taking me downstairs to the ER to check me. And I'm like thinking, good God almighty. I'm like, why? I'm like, well, I thought, well, he's not doing so good, and the good thing is, the nice thing is at the hospital where Tony is, they keep wheelchairs by the front door. And, we had one of the x-ray techs actually tell us, what, it would be a lot easier if, like, every time, like, you come here or show up someplace that's got wheelchair access, where you can get a wheelchair, stick him in a wheelchair and get, rush him on down and have one of those volunteers take him up to the, wound care or this, that, and the other place. So we got there on Tuesday and he's like, hey, don't forget to stick me in a wheelchair. And I'm like, I almost forgot. But I tell you what, I got his happy butt in a wheelchair and it made it a lot easier for the pair of us to get him upstairs to his wound care and then for them to take him downstairs to the ER and whatever. I mean, it just, oh my God, it just made it so much easier. I mean, it did. It oh God help me. I mean, I am so thankful to God and everybody else for being like, yeah, hey, get him in a wheelchair. I mean, Tony, I have to say, I'm not complaining, but Tony isn't light. I mean, I told him, I said, okay, fat body. I said, you're heavy. I said, sweetheart, you are getting heavy. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, I'm like, my purse doesn't weigh 90 pounds. It probably weighs 10. I'm like, what in the good Lord are you doing in this wheelchair? I'm like, are you holding like a cement block in your hands underneath my purse or something? I'm like, you are heavy. I mean, he was. And I was just like, I pushed him up there. And I'm like, I looked at him and I have to sit down for a minute. I mean, we sat there for maybe like 5, like I wheeled him on up there. And, what's ironic is the receptionist at the wound care doctor's office happens to be the retired librarian that worked up here at the local library. And I looked at her and I said, when we first started, I was like, I kept looking at her thinking, I know you from somewhere. I'm like thinking, I looked at her and I said, oh, wait, I know who you are. I was like, I kept thinking, I've seen you somewhere before and I recognize your voice because this lady was the library at the library near my house. And her voice was the one, like if you you got on a phone and, called the library, you know, you'd be hearing her voice on the machine. Like, hi, you've reached, the local library. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that. It was her. And I kept thinking, why do you, it's like, I looked at her and I'm like, I know you from somewhere. And then it hit me. And I said, I know you. You're from the librarian. I go, I wondered where you went. And she's like, yeah, I retired. I'm like thinking, honey, I would love to have that job, where, it's like you retire after 20 years and you get a government pension. I mean, I'm like thinking that's like an awesome job. But I wouldn't want to work at this county's library, to be honest with you. Not, I won't say why here. I mean, I'm not saying that as an offense to them. It's just I wouldn't for reasons I won't go into here. But anyway, back to what happened to Tony on Tuesday. Well, I get down there, and it's like we were, like I had 2 appointments on Tuesday, and Tony had the one in the morning. Well, it got to being like I had my second appointment at 1:30, and I was like, it got to be in about 1:45, and I had parked a big distance away from where the main door was to the hospital, just because everybody and their sister for some reason on Tuesday had to be at the hospital for some reason. I'm like, well, I was like, look, I gotta go to my second appointment, which was somewhere else. I won't say what that was for. It was a meeting about insurance, more or less. And I was like, I've got to go, I got to go talk to this person about, my insurance and what have you. And, I'm going to be a bit. Well, I know I'm not the fastest of walkers, so that's why I left early. And I'm like, just let me know when you get to a room, like where you are, what room you're in, what the story is, everything, once they take you up to a room. I could hear the nurses out in the hallway talking about Tony because, like they were trying to find him a room. Well, what ended up happening is on Tuesday, the doctor got a hold of Tony finally, by about noon. Took one look at his foot and went, no, you're going to have, I'm going to have to admit you and I'm going to have you, get you on the operating table and clean that out because it was a mess. Why Tony had been like not feeling so good was, it turns out Tony had a major infection in his foot. And from what I understand from Tony, the doctor had to cut from like here all the way down to his heel on his foot. And like the whole right side of his foot was just, it was just like he cut it open and got all this nastiness and gunk and infection out of Tony's foot. And it just, like they had, what was funny is I managed to, well, I got back in time to see Tony in his room. If you want to go see, if you're watching this on Facebook and you want to, see Tony, IM me if you live local, and I'll tell you what hospital he's in and what his room number is. But I have to tell you guys, just as an aside, if you do live local and you would like to visit him, visiting hours are from like 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening, local time. So you need to get out of there before 8 o'clock, because I'll tell you something. They actually, no fooling, at that hospital will lock the main door to where you cannot get out without getting the security guard to let you out. Fortunately for me, I've happened to know one of the security guards that works there, or did. I haven't seen him in a while. But it's like I found the security guard, what was it, Thursday night, and I'm like, hey, can you let me out? Because I mean, like, I was there with Tony on Wednesday till about 9:30, and I had to walk all the way to the ER and then out that door and all the way around the front of the building. And I was like, I'm getting my steps in the day. I mean, I ended up, by the time I got to the car, I was like, I gotta sit here for a minute. I do. I'm like, I was like, my legs started hurting. I mean, I can't walk long distances without getting tired anymore. And, in case some of you are wondering, yes, I have lost weight. I've just sat here and noticed how much weight's gone off my face since I, even shot that last video. Yes, I've lost weight, just in case some of you, that's an aside. But yeah, I've been losing weight like crazy, and I've been getting my walk on because of Tony, whether I want to or not. But it is what it is. But anyway, what they did was they hooked Tony up to some strong IV antibiotics, and I mean the strong stuff. Not none of this mamby-pamby stuff they sent you home with. They hopped him full of medicine, and he, since he had his surgery and everything on Tuesday, he started getting his coloration back, and he starts to look really good. Yesterday, on Friday, they were going to give him another surgery to get like some more gunk and nastiness out of him, but that didn't happen. What did end up happening is he ended up getting a PICC line in him right about here, where my fingers are pointing. He got a PICC line in his neck because of his kidneys. Tony's having kidney issue. He has renal failure or something. I've had this is like Tony's like 6th or 7th PICC line, and the second one that he's had, like the second or third one he's had since April. I mean, I'm at the point now where we're both like, whatever. I even made a comment to his one nurse. I said, you know what? You're probably going to wind up having to put a PICC line in him because his veins run. They run and they collapse. And I'm like, you're going to have to probably stick a PICC line. I actually said that to her Tuesday night. I'm like, you're going to probably have to put a PICC line in the boy. That's exactly what happened yesterday on Friday. And I'm like, told you. What happened is he had one like right here in his wrong arm, in his left wrist, like right about where my finger is. And it collapsed yesterday on Friday. And August 18th. Well, they took his happy butt down there around 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon and put a PICC line in his neck. I would say his happy ass, but it's not his ass. Tonight, though, and I did share this on Facebook, Tony asked me to, pull him up or pull the sheets up out from his back because he was feeling all humped up in the bed because they hadn't changed his bed sheets since before they took him downstairs to stick that PICC line in him. Well, he sat up, and I happened to pull the pillow out from behind him, and then I pulled the sheet up. Well, I took a picture of it so I could show it to him. There was a blood spot on the back of the sheet where he was laying. It was about that big. It was dried blood, but it was still, I knew what it was. I mean, it's, because it wasn't possible that he could have peed the bed, considering it was like, it was about in the middle of his back. The only way it could have been, could have been blood that drained down from his, PICC line. It's the only thing it could have been. He could have been bleeding a lot from that. And I went and got the nurse, and I said, hey, and this was about 8 o'clock tonight. I told her, I got the nurse, I said, hey, there's blood on my husband's sheet. I was like, he just sat up and I was helping adjust him and whatever. And I noticed the blood on his sheet. And she come running in the room with me. She sits him up, looks at it, and I said, see, right there. And she went, oh. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't know where that came from. Probably his PICC line getting put in yesterday or whatever. But I said, I just wanted to make sure you all knew, and that, somebody saw it, that there's this, about this big dried blood spot on his bed sheets. I'm like, you guys might want to check him again, and you might want to, get him some new, clean bed sheets and what have you, because that's not good. And just like she checked him briefly and said, okay, well, we'll be back in a minute to check him and what have you. She's like, but, excuse me, I'm in the middle of doing shift change with this other nurse here, and we'll come back and, but thank you for notifying us. I'm like, yeah, well, it's my job as his wife to, advocate for him, because Tony can't hear very well, and he won't think to speak up unless I rat him out like I did on Tuesday. Excuse me, my sinuses have been beating my tail for like the last few weeks. But I'm doing okay other than that. But Tony hopefully has got a surgery coming up next week at some point. He should be having surgery in the next week, sometime between now and Friday, probably. I'm not sure when. We haven't heard an ETA on that. I'll probably shoot another video closer to time when I actually know more details and more particulars on it. But yeah, that's all it is right now with him. I mean, he's doing okay, and like I said, he's getting his color back in. I mean, he looks great. He's starting to look good. He's starting tonight, much to my great pleasure, is Tony. If you know me well enough, you know that I call my husband a walking sinkhole. And I always tell him that he's got a place in Mammoth Cave named after him, Bottomless Pit. Because when I first married Tony, that man could put it down. I mean, he could really eat like a pig. I mean, he was an eater. I'm not saying that maliciously, mind you. I'm just saying that's what I've observed. I mean, and even, 15, 16 years ago, Tony, when Tony hurt himself, hurt his bowels several years, like 15, 16 years ago. Well, what happened is when he finally got that situation corrected, he all of a sudden got his appetite back, because he hadn't been eating for like 5-6 days, because he couldn't, because his body was processing this junk out of his system. Well, when he finally got it all out, and his insides, went, oh, and it's like all of a sudden he got his appetite back. You would have thought I was starving him. I mean, he'd eat, like I took him over here to the Longhorns near our house. He'd eat a great big plate about this big of food. I mean, he'd clear his plate, like, and then he'd be trying to eat my food, and I'm still like working on it. I'd be like, stop. I'm like, honey, stop. Excuse me. He'd eat a whole loaf of bread by himself, and then he'd be crying, I'm still hungry. I'm so hungry. And I'm like, honey, I can't help the fact that you're hungry. And I mean, he just could not stop eating. It was like I was starving him. And I wasn't. I was not starving him. I was, what I told him later was I should have taken, there's some Asian buffets down in Newport. There's also one out here in Alexandria. Now, the one out in Alexandria, I can't say if it's still in business or not. It seems like every other time I turn around, they're closed. But I should have, and I told him this. I'm like, I should have taken you down to one of those Asian buffets down there in Newport and turned you loose on them. And, I mean, granted that, like eventually he would have quit eating. He probably would have put down like 15, 16 plates. I got a funny story about there's a Chinese. There's an Asian buffet restaurant down there in Newport by Walt Center Lanes, that bowling alley down there in Newport, in that mall down there. Well, years ago, and Tony told me this story, and I still think it's hysterical. Years ago, I'd say probably 15 to 18 years ago, because actually, I take that back. It was at least 18 years ago at this point, at least 18 to 20 years ago. There's these two fellas that Tony knew back then, because we weren't married at the time when this happened. Tony told me that these two dudes he knew were eaters. These two guys, I mean, they weren't like great big huge men, like sumo wrestler big, but they were fairly large fellas. Well, what winds up happening is these two dudes go in to one of those Asian restaurants, buffet restaurants down there in Newport. Well, and I'm not entirely sure which one it was, so I can't tell you for sure. And there's something flying around in my face. Sorry. Well, these two dudes go into this Asian buffet restaurant, and between the two of them, and I half think that they were goading each other, these two guys end up eating like 12 to 18 plates of food a piece. Not between the two of them, a piece. I'm like, what the devil? Did they like not eat for 4 days or something? I was like, what the heck? Even the owner comes to them and says, "You'll eat too much. You need to go home now." And my comment was, well, why advertise yourself as a buffet? You should realize that every once in a while you're going to get a person in there, like these two guys, that are going to just show up at your place and basically clean you out. Get over it, or quit advertising yourself as a buffet. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that like in a mean-spirited way, but it is what it is. But yeah, I should have done that with Tony back then. Because then, he could have eaten and eaten and eaten and eaten, and it's just been like, yeah. I tell you what, though. Speaking of Tony at a Chinese or an Asian buffet, when was it? It was like last month at one point. We went to Tony's wound care. It was a Tuesday. It was one of his days off. Well, I got really hungry, and I was like, I knew how much Tony had been just crying about, I want to go eat at, the Asian buffet. And I'm like, okay, well, it was after he got paid. I said, okay, you know what? I said, here's what we'll do. I was like, I'm going to take you down there to that one Asian buffet, but you're going to have to pay for it. I said, I'll go get you your food and whatnot, but you'll have to pay. That's what I told him. And he's like, okay, whatever. And I'm like, I'll go get you your food so you don't have to, It's like I was running through there with 2 plates, and people were looking at me. I'm like, and then like I saw one person basically follow me to the table, and they went, "Oh, yeah." It was like I made a plate for me, and I made a plate for Tony, and I'm going through there with 2 plates, looking like a little piggy, And I'm like, and then I'd sit one in front of Tony, and I'd sit my plate down in front of my spot. And there was I forget what in the world it was that I got a hold of, that I found, that I knew that they had. Oh, it was plantains. They actually, at this one Asian buffet down there in Newport, they have fried plantains at the restaurant. And that's like the first time I'd ever seen fried plantains at an Asian restaurant. I took a picture of it and texted it to an acquaintance of ours up there that lives in New Jersey who occasionally watches my videos. Hi, Rosie. I know you're not watching yet, but I'm sure that you will at some point. So, hello, Rosie, if you're watching. I texted her and I said, hey, look what I got here. And she's like, what is it? I was like, plantains. And she's like, plantains at an Asian restaurant? Yeah. She's like, what's that? That's usually a Latino thing. I'm like, well, there's a lot of Latinos in here that we're eating at the Asian restaurant. And I was like, it is what it is. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, speaking of me and Tony doing things, in the description of this video, and this is something I forgot to mention when I started this video about half an hour ago, there's a, in addition to the warning about, Tony, like going on the medical stuff with Tony and stuff, I included some links to not only a GoFundMe page, but my book. Actually, there's two books. A book that I self-published years ago that it's not, I can't say if it's the whole book or not. It's on there. But there's also my book that I actually legitimately published back in January of this year, 2023. What it is, and I'm going to talk about that here now. Yeah, yes, Tony and I are needing help because clearly Tony hasn't been at work since this past Monday, and I doubt the veracity of him being back to work between now and this time next week. I would be surprised as anything if he's out of there by Saturday next week. I'll be honest. I mean, that's what I really think. But yeah, it's like if you could, I would appreciate, y'all buying copies of my book and helping out with the GoFundMe if you can. Because we need help paying some bills. We really do. It's mainly our rent, because we're like behind on the rent. That's our big thing. It's, $700 now for our rent. So if you could help us out with that, that would be great. The rest of it, we can figure out. But anyway, I mean, I hate talking about that on here, but it is what it is. I mean, we need help, legitimately. But there's, other things going on that I can't get into here. I can't say why. I mean, I've told Rosie what's going on. Tony knows what's going on. There's a situation that I have going on that I'm not at liberty to talk about right now for reasons that I will eventually, I may or may not shoot a video about it. Well, I might shoot a video about it, but all I'm going to say here is there's a situation I've got going on that I'm not at liberty to talk about a lot of stuff just because of the nature of what's going on. And once I know definitively for sure, and it's got nothing, it's like Show Greener's cat, put it that way. It's like it's got something to do with me and it doesn't at the same time. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But it's a situation where eventually I will, once we get everything sorted out and I figure out what in the world's going on with that, I may shoot a video about it. But it's not going to be any time in the near future. I mean, I'm talking like it'll probably be a year from now, maybe 2. Excuse me, before I actually am at liberty to talk about it. So, there's one definite video that's going to be coming out of that, more than likely. I mean, it depends. It depends on how it all shakes out once everything's said, done, and put to bed and what have you. And there's going to be some people that it may offend. That video may really offend. But you know what? There's one thing I want to say about that video is, well, you treat people how you want to. Even Jesus said, "Do unto others as you'd have done it unto you." My comment is treat people how you want to be treated. Talk to people how you would want them to talk to you. And that's something I've said about different things over the years. It's come to my attention that certain people have been bad-mouthing me. Of course, they haven't had the guts to say it to my face. I will say that. But, I found out that some people have been bad-mouthing me for months, apparently. And I'm like, okay, why am I hearing about this now? Why are they saying this? I mean, it doesn't upset me because I don't value those people's opinions. But one thing is like, these people who I'm talking about, and they know who they are. If you're going to insult me, at least have the stones to say that crap to my face. Of course, I don't value your opinion. If they happen to see this video, you know who you are and you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, enough about that. Well, anyway, I just want mainly, my number one concern right now is about Tony and getting my book out there. Well, anyway, please, if you can, give to my GoFundMe page. That would help out. And then please buy copies of the book. A lot of it, like book clubs, lots, okay? And, get it ordered for like your library and whatever, because believe me, every little time a copy of my book gets bought, the more it helps me out, okay? Well, anyway, like I said, as soon as I know what's going on with like Tony's surgery and all that fun stuff, I'll get on here and give you all an update on him and his situation later, okay? Thanks for watching. Have a great evening. Bye.